Yo guys, so welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are doing fantastic as usual. So we're back with our beloved to-do application that we are creating together. And in the last episode we added some nice tags capability. Well, we added the ability of showing the health tag on every single task. That's what we achieved, but this is really a good starting point for our new tagging system so that users can simply tag their items with something they can use to categorize their items. Maybe we can add some sorting functions so we can like sort them into and search by tags. You know, if you have like a million to-do items, I guess you want to search them on a tag or something like that. So that could be kind of cool, I guess. So what are we gonna do in this video? Well, I think we're gonna be at least adding the ability for users to create their own tags. Well, we currently got this hard-coded, but at least we have some data. So we have this nice tag component. And like we said, we want to make sure here that we are not passing in any data that the user has control over. So especially if you're planning on writing a server like I am, then you don't want users to be able to pass in any kind of color here and just render it, with CSS here. Like I said, we want to make sure that this data gets parsed or validated or sanitized so that we make sure that the user cannot put any arbitrary background color here, because that could of course be a security vulnerability. I don't think especially background color could have any real impact, but they could terminate that background color and write a new CSS rule, which in terms reads something from a remote URL, and then that reading of a remote URL actually causes your client to make a request to that remote server. So even if you don't really gain that much as an attacker, you kind of already written like an IP grabber. You can also get loads and loads of other information about the users, such as what kind of operating system they are running, what kind of browser they are running, all kinds of things that you definitely don't want any pesky hacker to get a hold of. So we want to make sure that this get color here makes sure to sanitize the input or do something to make sure that we can not put any arbitrary value in there. So we're going to look at some security concerns in one of the upcoming episodes. But in this episode, I think we should add the ability now for the user to create their own tasks. So we got our really stylish edit task model here. We added some nice write description capabilities in the previous episode as well. But we also want to make sure that the user can add their own categories here. So I think we should also render the categories that they currently have for this task. So let's go into our edit task model here and see if we can do something like that. So I guess we can use our tags component here and really see how that would look. So if I just put that there, yeah, so this is kind of what I mean. I want to render them here as well so that the user gets like an overview of what kind of tags they want or what kind of tags they have. But we also want to have the ability for the user to create a tag from here. Create like an input field or something where the user can actually create a new tag. So I want to do something stylish here. It's just like a button. If we click this button, boom, an input field will appear out of the blue. I think that will be kind of modern and cool, I guess. So why not try that out, I guess. So now we need to make sure this tags component should only be, I guess, for edit task model. We only want to have the ability to add new tags if this is from the edit task model. So we don't want them to be able to add any tags from here. I don't feel like that is necessary. We want to make it simple. We want to have a simple UI so we don't like clutter the main front page with like 1,000 options. I feel like it's good if they can actually do it in here in edit task when they have selected a task that they want to work with. Well, we can do something like a plus symbol, something like this. Well, we also have to make sure that is part of the flex here. So something like that. Let's just do something like items center also to vertically align that. I could feel there was something going on there. Okay, so that actually changed how it looked. Well, okay. So now I also want to make sure that the user can actually add something, but we only want to add that if it is in the edit task model. So I guess we can create a prop for that. So editing or something, bool. Oh, we want to have TypeScript, of course, as well. So lang ts. I got some cap lock. There we go. Editing. So this will be bool, boolean. I want to make sure that it's default false here. So now we only want to render this plus here if editing is true. So we use some conditional, some if statement here, Yeah, so that should be fine. Now we no longer render it there, and we want to render it here. We just put editing. I still got caps lock on. There we go. Now it should be off. There we go. So now it's only rendered when we have this editing prop set to true. So now let's add some functionality here. So whenever we click on that, I guess we can make a span so that we can actually add an event listener on it. So on click here, add a tag or something. So let's create that function, add tag. Whenever you click that, we want to run that function. Then we also want to have the appropriate cursor here, since this is, a span element. It does not have any, clicking cursor. So let's just use Tailwind CSS here, in fact, to add a cursor for this element. So if you don't know, you can actually put any kind of cursor on any element. That is simply with the cursor CSS rule. But we are lucky, of course, since Tailwind CSS supports this. So we can just do cursor pointer, I think, and that should give us the pointer cursor, which is that, standard clicking cursor that you are all familiar with. So whenever we hover that, we got that cursor pointer there. It's still complaining about accessibility, but of course, like I said in a previous episode, we will be looking at accessibility in a dedicated video, since there's a lot to cover and I really want to go through it like thoroughly so that we don't miss out on anything. So I'll do that in a upcoming video as well. But now whenever we click this, we want to add like an input field, I feel like. So let's just try it out. Let's just create an input field, like a dummy input field here, see how it looks. Well, that was very large. Let's see if we can size it down a little bit. If I do something like height 2 here. Yeah, so that should be fine. And then we want to have like width 12 or something. So this is kind of complicated. I want the user to be able to write, but do they really need to see what they are writing? I don't know. So let's just do something like width 12. Maybe we can set this to width 3. No, I don't think so. Okay. It doesn't really matter. It's still flexing it, of course. So this just causes it to have the same width as the other element. So I guess here, if they want to write something, can they actually use this appropriately? I feel like it could. So what I mean here is that you can actually write something here and then press enter or something. That's what I'm thinking. So we only pop this input field up whenever we click that button. I think that this is pretty good user experience. You could not hide it. You can have it visible all the time, but I feel like that is kind of unnecessary, having like an evil input field out there and put like a button or something. You can do that, of course, if you want to do it, but I just like to hide it, since if they're not interested in adding a new tag, they don't really need to see that form anyways. So whenever you click enter here, so like we learned in a previous episode, let's first start with making sure that this is only visible when we click that button. So we will use some conditional rendering as well. So let's just do something adding. This will just be a flag telling if we are actually adding something. So if adding, which should be set to true then when we click the button. So add tag, we should do adding is true. Let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. Nice. So one thing that I also want to do is auto-focusing on this element. That is kind of the point here. That you should just click that button and straight away get the ability to write something. So how are we going to do this? Well, normally you could do this with, document get element if you have like a reference to the element. But we are actually going to learn something new today. So there's actually something called like you can bind elements to variables, and that is super cool in Svelte. So instead of using like IDs or class names or whatever and using document get element and those vanilla DOM APIs, we can actually bind an element to a variable, and then we can use that variable, just like normal vanilla JavaScript. So we can do something like bind this, I think. So we're just binding this. It's kind of an interesting syntax. So we're binding this as like the component or like the tag, like the element. We're binding this, and then we bind that to a variable. So in our case, this will be let add input or something that describes what it is, and then we'll give it a nice type as well. So this is the vanilla type for an input element. So HTML input element, and let's also make this null. So it can actually be null, it will be null like the default value there. And then let's just assign that here. So add input, and now we should actually have access to that variable. We should actually have access to that element through the help of this variable. So let's see if that works. So whenever we click that button, we want to autofocus that, and the way to do that is by focus, I think that's called. So let's see if that works. Clicking that, it did not work. Did I miss something? Add input is null. Okay, that was a bummer. Maybe it doesn't work like I thought. Let's just have a Google then. So svelte bind this. Let's see if I forgot. Bindings this. Yeah, so it seems to be like this. It seems to be the case. So maybe I don't want this to be null, since it will actually maybe set that value immediately. This will be kind of bad TypeScript, I guess. Let's see if that works. Nope, it didn't. Add input is still undefined. All right, okay. I think I'm being stupid here. Of course, this will run adding is true, but since we have conditional rendering, we actually have not bounded that yet, so we can actually not target it because it's not being rendered. It's not on the screen because this code runs synchronously. So we will only have this if statement run after this is already executed, and then we can't really focus that. So I think we can actually use it, just like to do a timer here or something. I don't know how good practice this is, but we really need to have access to that element, and we can't have access to it. We could do this with just hiding it. So we could use a class here, make it display none or something, and make sure it stays hidden, but we still have access to it, of course. Or we can do it this way. I feel like this is nicer. Both of them are not really that nice, but let's try it. So set timeout here. So you're just creating like a timer of, I guess 1 tick should be fine, since it will run immediately. I'm pretty sure. Let's just give it 5, just in case something slows it down. I'm not really sure how quick it should, but I'm assuming it should be like immediately. There's no reason for it to wait for it. So there we go. So whenever I click that now, we can actually see that it's auto-focusing on that element like we wanted. So one of the things I also want to do is whenever we unfocus, when I unclick this, then I no longer want to do this, and I did not submit it. Then we also want to use our blur. So we learned this in a previous episode. We can actually use the blur here, the blur event whenever the user unfocusing, when an element has lost focus. So let's do something like on lost focus or something. Then we want to do adding is false, so that we hide the input element again. So on lost focus. Let's see if that works. There we go. So that's kind of nice. Whenever we click that, it will let me add some data here, or if I am not happy with that, I can just click somewhere else and it will go away. Isn't that nice? So now we also want to use key down here. So whenever we press enter here, that we actually add something here, so that we can add the tags. So let's try that out. So on input key down. I really need to refactor these names. They are really inconsistent. So, but for now, let's leave them like that. So on input key down, we just gonna use this keyboard event like we learned. In fact, we can probably just look at that code. It should be from to do item create. So let's just copy that. So let's just use that code. Let's just copy that code since it worked so amazingly previously. So let's just bind that as well. So we want to do on key down. So whenever you press a key in this input field, we want to run that function. And if it's not enter, we return early like a good practice lad we are. So now we actually want to add this, but we actually don't have any list here. We're not really have any data here, so let's actually just I guess we can just do this immediately. Why create a dummy example data if we can just do it right away? Let's just look at modal here. We actually want to add tags to this task interface, so let's just try something like that. Tags, and there should be an array of tag data, so each task will have an array of tags, hopefully. So let's just add something like this. So let tags, and this should be tag data array, so we'll get that from the item, and then we can loop over them and do something like each tags as tag. And then of course we want to use a keyed each statement, but like we learned in one of the first episodes. If you haven't watched that, feel free to do that. It's really important to learn about keyed each statements if we don't want to get really confused about why our application is not behaving like we expected. So let's see if that works. Do we actually have a property? Yeah, we do. Nice. So now we can use data here. I guess we want to bind it as well. Now this was complained because we actually haven't actually provided any tags. Now I actually don't have any tags on any task. So I guess my local storage is a bit outdated. So let's just clear that, and let's just create a new task which should actually have any tags. So let's just add it here. It's actually complaining right away. How amazing from VS Code. So let's just give, I guess we can use UID 4v4. There's no reason to not. So let's just use that, and name here should just be health again. And this color, we can do red this time to see that that actually works. So does that work? What is it complaining about? Description. Oh, okay. Well, we want that to be an empty string. So let's see if that works. It does not seem to work since we are not actually binding it anywhere. So in to-do item, I guess, do we have tags here? Well, to-do item actions. Nope, maybe not. Well, there we go. So tags, and this should be bind tags, I guess, data.tags. Let's see if that works. No, it does not. Still does not work. Want that to be tag data. Why is that not working? Editing boolean. What's happening here? We're not exporting it. I'm being really stupid. So we need to export it, of course, if we want it to be a prop. And there we go. There we got our nice tag going. So it still does not work in edit task model, of course, because we have not bound anything here. So let's just do something like bind tags, and that should be data.tags, of course. Let's see if that works. And there we go. So let's now see if we can actually add a tag here. So in our case, we want to add it. So here we could actually get the data immediately from the input element. If you wanted, we could do something like add input.value, but we're going to be following the amazing Svelte way and actually create a data binding for it. Like I said in a previous episode, this might add like a slight overhead, I believe, since we're not accessing it directly and we're actually listening for it changing, but it results in much cleaner code in most cases, so why not do it? I don't think it's that big of a deal. If you're, really concerned about performance, then you should, of course, think about these things. But for our nice hobby application, it's definitely not needed. So let's just do something like tag name. So let's just use the spread operator here. Like I said, we need to reassign it for Svelte to know it. So your first instinct might be to want to push here, but Svelte will actually not know about that change, that state change. So we need to reassign it for, the compiler to really know that this is something you want to be reactive. So in our case, let's just do something like tags here, and then we want to add a new tags at the end there. So that should be fine. And let's just see if we can do something. Nope. Okay, so ID should be UUID4. We can import that from here, I think. Yeah. So let's just copy that, and let's see, UUID v4. Then we want to have a name as well, so that should actually be tag name. And then we want to have description, or not description, we want to have color, of course. And this will, I guess we can generate a random color or something later. Let's just make it green for now and see if that works. So if I do something like that, it did not work, sadly. Maybe tag name is actually, it seems like it added something perhaps. So let's have a look here. Yeah, so it's actually empty here, but there is something there. So I guess it's not binding. Yeah, we're not binding this value here. So we need to bind the value here to tag name and see if that works. So bind that there. There we go. Isn't that amazing? So now we can actually add that, but as you see, we have not reset this, so we're just adding on to appending to it. So let's just clear that if you want to add more tags so that you don't have to clear it yourself. So there we go. Now we can actually add some nice tasks here. Isn't that amazing? Alright, so now that you can actually add some tags, you might also want to have different colors for them. So as we can see, if we add some tags now, we can see that they all kind of have the same color, and that is kind of boring, It's kind of a visual thing with these tags. If we can actually differentiate them just by color, we don't have to actually read them. We will just know that health is red and ASD is green or whatever. So I think it would be kind of cool if we could assign a color to them and render that. So I think it's kind of important that we can actually let the user change the color, but I think also for a default, we can just like randomize the color. So if the user doesn't want to select one, we don't have to have like a default color. We can just randomize the color, and if that looks good, then that will do it. So I guess we can just search up a function for this. I can't think of the top of my head. I mean, really, it's just creating like some random numbers for all the components of the RGB of this hex from 0 to FF. But let's just search up, because I'm sure someone else has done this before, so let's not waste our time. Otherwise, feel free to do that if you find amusement in that. I'm really sure you can learn a lot from that. But let's just search it up for some convenience here. So random hex color JavaScript or something like that. How to generate a random color in JavaScript. Let's see here. So we got some weird stuff here. I'm not too sure. So this is okay. It was updated in 2020. When you see 2009, you should be cautious when copying and pasting code from 2009, because things have changed since then. But if it has been updated, and of course, I don't think there's a problem with that one. But let's just see if there's something nice here. All of these looks, that looks even worse. What is going on here? Crazy. Yeah, same here, Martin. First time I'm seeing this squiggly line. The first time I actually know it exists. But let's see here. Random color generator. Build a random hex color generator with vanilla JavaScript. No, this is even worse. Okay, let's just use CSS tricks, because this was looking probably the easiest one to understand, or maybe not. So yeah, okay, so this is the, I guess this is from the color values. If I just search for this, okay, so yeah, you can see that this is just the value of the, all the total possible combination. So that is kind of how that is derived from that. But yeah, I guess we can just use that little helper function here. That looks pretty straightforward, one-liner code there. So instead of this nice green color we have, we can just use, I guess we can create a function for this. So generate random color, something like that, and then we can just return that. So this will be hexadecimal, but we also want to include that hashtag there. But I guess we can just do something like this. Let's just use some nice templating here. So we can just use hashtag here and generate random color. That should probably do the trick. Let's see now. So if we create a new tag here, yep, there we go. So this is actually a pretty big problem. If we get something really light here, perhaps as an example, this one here. Actually some of these are actually not working completely. So, or maybe it's just completely white, but it's not showing up. Yeah, it's not actually working. Something broke with that one. It didn't work. That was kind of a shame. So maybe this is not actually working as well as I would have thought. Sometimes this does not work properly. So I guess we can use this one with some random shifting and stuff going on. We can probably reduce this into one line as well. Yeah, there's no problem with that. So let's try if that one. Let's see if that alternative works out better. We had some really nice. We got a lot of blue colors here, but maybe that was some random noise in our atmosphere telling the computers that we're gonna be blue today. But it seems that it's pretty random. Not really seeing a lot of red colors here, but oh well. We also want to make sure that we are wrapping here, of course, since we are running out of space there and overflowing a bit. So that should be in tags, in fact, to make sure that we just wrapped it, and it should be flex wrap. So if you don't know, this is the way to wrap when you're dealing with Flexbox. We can actually just wrap these components to the next line. The usual layout is to have them, horizontally flex direction row. But, if they use more space than the whole row width, then we want to make sure that we're also wrapping down to the next lines so we make some space for them. But this seems to work. One problem that I had in mind is that if this color that it generates is, way too light, then maybe it will actually be hard to read the actual tag name here. But it seems most of these are actually kind of easy to read. Maybe this one, for example. So, if it's super light, there's definitely, I've tried this before. We can actually do something like contrast. So we can actually check if this color would be a good contrast to the text color. But I think, that's kind of overkill right now. We can probably read them. I can, if I squint my eyes, I can see that it says ASD there. But, this is something worth considering if we are doing random colors here, because sometimes these colors could actually be a bit bad for the contrast here. So you can actually not read it properly, and that would be be a shame, but for now I think this is fine. So we're just rendering a random color here, and it works pretty well. I feel like we can also make sure that when we copy something from Stack Overflow, that we actually keep a reference to where that came from. So we're actually borrowing code that someone has written here. Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with this. Okay, so actually I need to do attribution. I did not know that. So you actually need to give some credit when you're using someone's code from Stack Overflow. So I guess that is what we are doing right here by posting a link to that. I hope that is fine. Yeah, provide a link to the license. Let's do that as well. Let's be some good boys here and actually do everything. That should be fine, I think. So now we can actually, add some nice colors for our tags, and that looks a lot better. We can actually save that, I hope, and reload. Yep, nice. We also want to make sure that we can actually remove the tags. So what's the point in adding tags if we cannot remove them? That is really problematic if the user wants to remove them. So I guess we can just add some kind of delete button or remove button next to them to remove them. And I only want to do this in the edit task modal, of course, because we are doing changes in this edit task modal that we might not want to persist. So we just press the close button, or we could probably just rename this to discard or something. I think that is even better than just close. So discard, we're discarding the changes. So we are really clear to the user here that we're actually not saving anything when we press this button. So let's also just then add a little quick remove button next to them. So that should be pretty easy. Since we now have an icon library, we created these nice icons here, we can probably find a nice remove button in the iconify library that we are working with. So let's just search for a nice remove button here. So remove, maybe delete. Yeah, so I want to kind of have a round button, not, yeah, there we go. This is pretty much what I wanted. So, yeah, let's try this one out. This looks pretty nice. So let's just use that with Svelte, and yeah. So that should be pretty easy. And then we also want to use flex here, our beloved flex here, so that we can actually have a nice little horizontal layout without any issues. And then we can do some gap, I guess gap 1, and then we can do item center here to vertically align that button. And there we go, nothing to worry about. It looks pretty nice, How are we gonna do this? Well, I guess we need to use a span here. I don't think there's actually an on-click event on the icon itself. I think that would be kind of weird to do that. So let's just wrap it in a span container here. So we want to make sure this is also cursor pointer, since the default cursor on that is not the pointer cursor, so that we can actually tell the user here's something you can actually click, and that is definitely worth adding. So then we can add on click here, and then we should just do something like on delete, I guess, on delete. Then we can call that there, and then we can, how are we gonna do this? Well, I guess we can just dispatch, create a nice amazing event dispatcher here as well. So we can just do something like dispatch, create event dispatcher, and dispatch here, and that should be delete. So let's see now. Like I said, these things are definitely worth considering when it comes to accessibility, but we are going to be covering that in an episode on its own, because I want to make sure that we're actually not missing anything. If we rush it too much, then we're definitely going to miss out on some of these things, and I feel like it's super important, but it's something you can probably do, once you have some things going. I think it's kind of demotivating if we're going to sit here, making it completely accessibility friendly, but feel free to do that, of course, if you feel like it's important to you. So now we can just dispatch that to the parent component, which is tags.svelte, and then we can bind that here. So on delete, we can do something like, I guess, on tag delete or something. So on tag delete, and then we can do something like tag data, I assume. And then we can do tags equals tags.filter, and then we do t here for the tag, and tag.id isn't tag.id. We're only retaining the tags that are not the tag that we are deleting. So then we can do on tag delete here. Let's see, on tag delete. Oh well, okay, we want to have an anonymous function here, of course, to make sure that we're actually, we can just access that from the loop here. So we can do that. Let's see if that works. That did not work for some reason. Item is not defined. Oh yeah, it's called tag. Now we can actually remove it. Isn't that amazing? Let's see if that works. If I save now, does that work? Yes, it does. You know, how amazing is that? I barely had to do anything and it just works. Isn't that amazing? So that is kind of because we have this nice JSON structure. We have just an object, and whatever we put in this object, we are serializing. So we could add any property and it will be, you know, included in the final JSON. So that is both good and bad, of course. So you can actually put whatever you want in this object. It has no structure. But it also makes our life much easier now because we're just adding a new property and it's automatically, you know, added to it. We're just adding something to this array and then we're saving it and then it's just magically working. We don't have to like manually write out which properties to serialize or anything. We can just see it working. So it works really nice here with Svelte and JSON structure. So now we can actually remove some tags. That is kind of nice. I guess since we have, you know, some content editable here, so we can actually change this text as it is written, I guess we can do that for the tags as well. But we also want to make sure here that we can not see this, you know, delete button here. That is really bad. So we only want to show that in the edit task modal, of course, because, you know, this is not part of editing the task. If you want to edit the task, you open the edit task modal. That is the purpose there. So let's just make sure that we do something like that. So we have editing already. So that should be pretty easy, I hope. So we can just pass that on, I guess. So editing, we can use the shorthand here that we are passing in the same name there. So let's do something like export editing bool, and that should be, I guess, well, it doesn't need to have a default value. I feel like that's fine. So if that is editing, if it's not, well, yeah. So if it is editing, we only want to render that if it is actually editing. Let's see if that works. There we go. Yep, it did work amazingly. Great. So let's just do that content editable as well. So yeah, I guess we need to span here. This gets a bit weird, but you know, it's fine. We're doing this just so that we're not, since if we have like an icon here at the same time, it's also kind of weird here if we are changing that tag name like without editing it. So we only want it to be content editable if we are editing. Let's see if that works. I think we can actually bind that to be content editable only when it is editing. So let's just do something like bind text content data.name here, and let's see if we can do that. Maybe not content editable. Oh yeah, okay, so we can just add that there. Let's see if we can do this, you know, conditionally. So we only want it to be content editable if it is editing. Editing, let's see if that works. Content editable attribute cannot be dynamic if element uses two-way data binding. We run into a brick wall here. That was a real shame, you know. I'm kind of expecting way too much of Svelte here. So let's Google that. I'm sure someone else has this problem. And let's see if we can actually change something here. Type cannot be, yeah. So is there anyone doing this with content editable? Dynamically generated. Well, okay, what are we doing here? Let's see here. So this will be weird. I think we actually have to do this with an if statement instead. So it seems like we can actually not do this just from my quick Googling here. But if you know something different, if you know that this is actually possible, feel free to let me know, because it would be nicer to just have one, you know, one container here, not splitting it up. But we can just do conditional rendering in general here. We can just do if editing, then we can have this component. You know, it kind of leads to code duplication, but it's not really. We just have a span anyway, so you know, what does it matter? So we can just use a span if it's not editing, and then we can do data.name, I guess, and then we can do content editable, and that should be working, I hope. So we cannot edit anything here. That's just normal. And if I change it here, you can see that it works. Yes, it does. So we also want to make sure that we're not doing spell checking here. So let's do spell check false, and let's see if that works. Yep, that looks pretty nice. So now we can change the name of the tags here as well. Isn't that amazing? So I feel like the tag system is pretty much complete in terms of adding and, you know, editing and deleting. I also want to add the ability for the user to change the color of these tags, but I feel like we cannot really do that in this edit task modal. It would be weird to have like a color picker or something for these tags here. So, but I feel like we should dedicate an own page to tags here, so that we can have like a list of all tags in the whole application that the user has created, and then they can see the names. They can also change them, they can also remove them, so we have every single tag in the same place, and there we can put the color picker. I feel like that would be, you know, the best user experience. It would be weird here to, like, jam in a color picker. How would we do that? If we put it on this every single tag here, it would be really weird. Maybe you have some fancy UI UX design in your mind, but I don't, so feel free to let me know if you have a different way to solve that design problem. But I feel like that is for another episode. It's actually better that we keep these videos a bit short than try to jam everything into a single episode, because then we're just rushing it, and either that or we create like a 2-hour long video, and who has the time to watch through all of that. So I feel like this drag and drop functionality, I feel like that is for the next episode as well. So I promised this in like the last 2 episodes, but we have been so busy with the tags system, and I really want to work with these tags because I feel like they're a great addition. So that drag and drop should be really straightforward, hopefully, because I've used that before and it was really, really easy to work with. It was just boom, you install that and you slam some attributes on, you change a bit in your data structure, and boom, you got drag and drop. I personally thought like drag and drop is the super hardest thing, one of the hardest things you can do in web design or web development, but it was super simple with that library. So we're going to be looking at that in the next episode. But I feel like we got a lot of nice functionality implemented now, and we're really starting to see the application take some shape here. Feel free to like or dislike the video depending on what you thought of it, and feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or if you caught me doing something stupid perhaps. So if you would want to subscribe, that would mean a lot, because I'm trying to build a community here where we can learn a lot from each other. So speaking of helping each other out, I actually got a comment from one of you guys suggesting that we can actually do some changes here. So we have this declaration here. We can actually change this to just be like lists equals get lists. I think that works as well. So if I complete that now, we can see that it still works. One of the things you might want to consider here, can I actually add a type here? Would that work? I actually don't think we can do that though. So this is, I guess, a thing. If you're not using TypeScript, then maybe you don't have the reason to do that. But we can actually not specify a type here from what I can see. So no, it depends on if you want to have a type for this or not. But you who commented about this, feel free to let me know if there's a way for me to put a type here. I'm a big TypeScript fan, so it would be nice to have a type here. But this otherwise looks much nicer than have like a declaration and then you do assigning it there. So I guess we can also change this up. I feel like that looks a bit weird, so I like to keep my reactive stuff here at the bottom. I feel like so it's closer to the HTML where the other reactive stuff is happening, so that you can just go up here and read it quickly. That's my reason for putting it there. But otherwise, I feel like this looks pretty nice. So that was a nice refactoring. Thanks a lot for commenting about that. I really appreciate you commenting and helping me out. It's all about learning from each other. So what I was saying is, feel free to subscribe if you want to be part of this community that I'm building. But thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.